Hello, and this is the lecture on how to use the students' t-tables that are located in the back of the book. And also you can get these online. In fact, the one I'm using is one that I found online. When using the students' t-table, there's really one of two things that you're going to want to do. You're either going to want to calculate the probability, or you're going to want to calculate a critical value. Calculate a probability, you have to be given that critical value, or that t-value, or that test statistic. If you're going to calculate a critical value, you have to know the probability, usually called tail probabilities or confidence levels. So to estimate a probability, you're going to need the t-value, and you're going to need the number of degrees of freedom. When you're doing one sample stuff, it's sample size minus 1. If you're doing two sample stuff, it's usually sample size minus 2, or frequently it's sample size minus 2. Usually you got to figure out some way of getting that degrees of freedom. So the first thing, you find the degrees of freedom along the left side of the table. Then you find the t-value in the body of the table. And then the probability is going to be given at the top of the table. Notice how this is different than the normal distribution table. Here the degrees of freedom on the left side, and the t-value is in the body of the table. And the probability is given along the top of the table. For instance, let's go ahead and look at a sample t distribution table. Let's pretend that we want to find the probability, or estimate the probability, given that the number of degrees of freedom is 5 and the t-value is, I'll pull that number out of the air. So degrees of freedom is 5, t-value is 2.571. Go down the left side, look for degrees of freedom to be 5, and go across until you see the t-score of 2.571. You found it. Go up for the probability, for the p-value. It's 0.025. Frequently you'll want to double that, but that depends on the problem itself. Another example. Let's say we have a number of degrees of freedom is 12, and the t-value is 2.000. So we go down here, degrees of freedom is 12. Go across till we get 2.000. Nope, there is no 2.00, but it is between these two values. So we know that the probability is going to be between these two, between 0.05 and 0.025. If you have to pick a number, pick something between the two. Another example, say the degrees of freedom is 30 and the t-value is 1.8. So we scroll down to, there's no 30 on this table. Okay, let's change the problem then. Let's say it's 24 and 2.08, t-value being 2.08. Go down degrees of freedom side to 24, go across till you see 2.08. Nope, it's between these two values. So the probability, or that area under the curve, is going to be between these two values, 0.025 and 0.01. Now the problem with the t distribution is there's a lot of issues with that. It's just usually you're going to have to estimate that probability. Even if you've got the table in front of you, you're going to have to estimate it. Okay, there's something else that you can do. Instead of just estimating probability, you may want to calculate a critical value. That's going to require the probability and the degrees of freedom. Notice both of these are going to require the degrees of freedom. And the probability can also be called the confidence level or the area in the tail. It depends. So you find that probability along the top of the table, find the degrees of freedom down the left-hand side, and at the intersection of that column and that row, it's going to be the t-value. Let's see how that works. There it is. Say degrees of freedom, and I'm pulling these numbers out of the air again. Say the degrees of freedom is 5, and the probability is 0.025. So you go down 5 along the degrees of freedom, 0.025 along the top. Their intersection is right here at 2.571. So that's your critical value, 2.571. Again, you will usually want to divide your original probability into two parts, one for the left tail and one for the right. So I'm assuming you did that already. Another example, let's say the degrees of freedom is 15 and the p-value is 0.05. So 15 along the left side, 0.05 along the top, gets us to 1.753. and that's going to be our critical value, 1.753. And let's say one more example. Degree of freedom is 1, and the probability is going to be 0.005. So degrees of freedom is 1 all the way across to 0.005. Notice 0.005 is right there. So the critical value is going to be 63.657. Pretty large. So that's how you use the t-tables. Hopefully this was helpful. T-table is a little bit more straightforward than the normal distribution, but the rules of reading the t-table are very different from that of the normal distribution. So good luck and have fun.